What is up, everybody? This is O-Artistry here, and we're going to be doing a video talking about the ban list. There's going to be quite a lot of changes, and I thought it'd be interesting to give my own thoughts and opinions on it. So without further ado, let's dive straight in to the ban list. Okay, so I am on the Mastador Meta website just because this is much easier to look at and we can discuss everything. And also, you know, everything's just really nicely organized. So, yes, this ban list will be effective on the very 1st of January of 2024. Literally, new year, new ban list. So this is going to be really interesting. So let's just look at every card. So the first one that we have is Agido, the Ancient Sentinel. So this card and alongside Kelbeck, the Ancient Vanguard, are really good with tier mounts. So yeah, Shizu's newest cards, I think it's understandable why they're on the forbidden list. I've never faced them myself. I just know they're incredibly powerful. Next we have Mathmech Circular. So obviously this is a really good level 4 generic Cybers monster, but Mathmechs are really powerful. You know, they can get around a lot of boards, and a lot of around situations, so it makes sense why this card would also be on the list. The only one that I'm not 100% sure is Isolde, the Two Tails of the Noble Knights. I'm sure there are some really good combos and reasons why this is forbidden, but if you said limited, I'd be a bit more like, okay, fair enough, because it's really good for warriors, and, you know, I think the only other thing is that it really helps thin out the deck with as many equip spells as possible. So that's maybe the only other thing that I can really think of with this card, but I gotta be honest, I'm not too sure why this is on here. Maybe as banned. Limited, maybe, but banned? I'm not 100% sure. I mean, on the OCG, this is a 3. So I'm not 100% sure on that one. So if someone can let me know in the comments why. I know it did a really good showing in the Exodia deck at the YCS. Maybe that's why, but I have no idea. Now we're going to move on to the limiteds. So we have Orcust Harp Horror. So, okay, this, from reading it, is a really good extender by banishing this card to summon an Orcust monster from your deck, which can be any, and you're locked into darks, which this probably doesn't matter. You're probably summoning dark attributes anyways. So yeah, I think that this is just a really good extender. It's been banned for a long time, so I think it's good just to see it limited at 1, and we'll see kind of, does it make a big impact? If not, maybe more will come off, or if it's making a big, you know, a much bigger impact, then maybe they'll either keep it at 1 or put it back on the ban list. I think that's what they're kind of getting a feeler on this card. Now this one, Redox the Dragon Ruler of Boulders, is really interesting to me, because this card, obviously Dragon Rulers themselves, they were quite strong back when they were first released, but now not so much. You know, but if this card is in your hand or graveyard, you can banish 2 Earths or Dragon monsters from hand or graveyard and special summon this card. So it's a really good extender with 3,000 defense points. And then, you know, if during your opponent's end phase, if this was special summoned, you bounce it back to the hand. So it's kind of like a spirit monster, but on your opponent's end phase. And then you can discard this card and an Earth monster to target 1 monster in your graveyard and summon that card. So that's any Earth, so I can see that why, because there was a lot of Earth attributes back in the day. And then you can add, if this card is banished, you can add an Earth Dragon monster from your deck to your hand. So I'm guessing multiple copies maybe, but now it's obviously banned. I mean, in the OCG it's banned, and this is limited to 1. I'm not too sure. I think it was just a really good extender, but it's good to see it kind of back on. Next is Rescue Ace Airlifter. Now, obviously, Rescue Ace is one of the newest archetypes to grace the board, and, you know, it's interesting. You know, I think they're quite affordable, I believe, Rescue Ace cards. I believe that because they were in a certain pack, that you could get these with relative ease. And obviously this allows you to, I think it's Rescue Ace Emergency Call or something like that. It's a spell card. I gotta be honest, I don't know too much about Rescue Ace. You know, they're not really in my locals. I haven't really seen them play that much, but they are warriors. This is a level 4 warrior, so, you know, with Rhoda, you could search this and then normal special summon it, and then you get a search. So I can see a lot of combo play, so I can see why this is limited. Next is Unchained Soul of Shavara. Again, this is one of those cards that I don't really know much about. I haven't seen anyone really play Unchained. It is a fiend. It's fire, so there's the fire structure deck. Because during the main phase, if this card is in your hand, you can target a fiend or a face-down card you control, destroy it, special summon this card, but while it's face up in the monster zone, you cannot special summon monsters except fiends. I don't know then, maybe this would be because of Fire Kings? I don't know, because obviously the Fire King structure deck came out. This is a fire attribute. I'm just thinking maybe that's why, or maybe it's because it's a, you know, maybe just there's a lot of unchained recursion. Maybe they were worried that there'd be some weird Fire King Unchained combo. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. Son of Avalon, Dreus, and Sunvine Healer. So these guys, they did make a bit of a splash, I remember, in a few formats back with Rika, I believe, because they're all plant attribute, you know, plant types. But I'm not 100% sure why these have been limited. Again, they're pretty good, decently, like, you know, they're rank 1s, but they require plants. This is a level 4 lower plant, and this is a normal plant, which is obviously the Sunvine Seed, or whatever it is. So I'm not too sure why they're limited, but Konami's got its reasonings. I'm sure they'll all become apparent. Ebe the World Chalice Justica. So if this card is synchro summoned, you can treat one World Chalice normal monster as a tuner. Okay, so it's an extended play. If this card is synchro summoned, you can add a World Legacy. Okay. If this card is synchro summoned and sent from the field to the graveyard, you can summon a World Chalice monster from your deck or grave, except for Eve. Okay, so this is kind of like a really good extender, non-tuners. It's a tuner itself. Oh, and then for this card, synchro summon, so kind of like Harpy Lady, you can treat one of the normal monsters as a tuner. I see. So it's kind of like Cyber, is it Harpy Slash? Cyber, something like that. It's got 2800, and it can make any Harpy a tuner. Snatch Steel. Now, I'm going to discuss this a little later on about this, but it's interesting, but like at the same time, and I know a lot of people are like, oh my goodness, Snatch Steel, but I'm not so sure, and I'll explain all that, my reasonings a little later on, I promise. Now, we do have Gozen Match, Rivalry of the Warlords, and there can only be one at 1, which I find hilarious that there can only be one is at 1. But basically, these are all floodgates, so obviously each player can only control one attribute, each player can only control one type of monster, and then this is each player can only control one monster of each type. So maybe there was some weird combo with there can only be one and Rivalry of the Warlords, which forced you to literally play one type, you know, instead of playing you know, but I don't know. But to be honest, the only one that really I'm like, oh good, I'm glad this is at 1, is there can only be one. I never really see anyone play Gozen Match these days, and I haven't really seen anyone play Rivalry these days, but there can only be one, I have seen some play. I think it's good for, you know, obviously if you've got new or returning players who might not really know these cards, because honestly, they don't say a lot, right? They do not say a lot. And that can be very annoying. Because there's a whole lot of rulings outside of these cards that can be very frustrating. But you might not know it because it's not on the card, if that makes sense. So, for example, if you, let's say, I don't know, you used Chaos Summoning Beast, which is a fiend, to tribute itself to summon Ravael, that would be an illegal play because you're sacrificing a fiend for a fiend, even though that fiend is in the graveyard because you tributed it. It's stupid, and I can see why people would get frustrated with that, because there's a lot of things outside of this card that don't make a lot of sense. So yeah, goes in match, Rivalry of the Warlords, and they can only be one. I think it's a solid choice to hit these cards. They are annoying, especially if you don't really have necessarily that much back row removal in terms of your spells and traps, because you may have a lot of monsters, but if your opponent is really trying to shut down those as well, it can be very annoying. So yeah, I think it's good. Okay, so semi-limited is Dino Wrestler Pranktops, Speedroy Terratop, and Pearly Sleepy Memory. So let's talk about Pranktops first. So obviously Cash Tier Fenrir has not been hit whatsoever on the ban list, which, you know, means that it would make sense that Pranktops would kind of come back because it does a very similar-ish thing. It reminds me a lot of Mirror Force and Sakuratsu Armor back in the day, right? Mirror Force was this really powerful card that destroys all monsters, you know, and Saku destroys one. Pranktops is like a poor man's Fenrir, you know what I mean? Which is how Saku was a poor man's Mirror Force back in the day. So for those budget players who are looking for cards to use but can't quite afford Fenrir because Fenrir is expensive, Pranktops is a good alternative to use, so it would make sense why this is limited to 2. And then you also have things like the Ancient Warriors, Loyal Guan Yu, all that type of stuff that's still at 3. You know, there's a lot of those types of cards that are very similar, so it's good to see Pranktops being now at 2, in my opinion. Speedroy Terratop. So if you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. So this is a great starter because when normal special summon, add a Speedroy monster from deck to hand. So it is a level 3, which is really good for Xyz plays. You know, I believe I remember seeing Speedroid, Burning Abyss, and what was the Phantom Knights? It was something like Phantom Abyss Roid or something like that. There's a deck which rotated all 3 of them around together because they were all level 3s. It was a very complicated kind of deck, so it's interesting to see this at 2. So I think it's good to kind of see it. It's really good on Duel Links, you know, and stuff, so it makes sense then that now they've decided, okay, we'll bring this maybe back. Now I don't know much about Pearly, I've got to be honest. I have a few of the cards, but I've never played it myself. I know they Xyzes, there could be a link, I have no idea. So the next spell or effect damage you take this turn will become 0. So this used to be at 3, it's now at 2. You can discard a card, and if you do special summon a level 1 Pearly from your deck, okay, so that's a really powerful search. And a Pearly Xyz monster that has this card as material. Okay, so there's a way you can attach this card, so by making it, and then once per turn during your standby, oh okay, so it gets the effect that during your opponent's standby phase you get a +1 draw. So putting this down at 2 means that you're, you know, I'm guessing a lot of Pearlies must be using this at 3, so that you kind of get 3 draws, because it's not a hard once per turn, it's just once per turn, so you could probably just get triple draws. Which makes sense, and then any battle damage you take is 0. So that's interesting. And then, yeah, special summoning a level 1, you know, by discarding a card. This is a 1-for-1, with more effects. So yeah, I can kind of see why this would be at 2, because this is a very powerful card. I've never really played Pearly myself, but I can understand why this is on the list. Unlimiteds. Unlimited power! Now, let's look at Infinity Archfiend. When you draw this card and you have no other cards in your hand, reveal this card, special summon it from your hand. And then if this is special summoned, you can add an Infinity card from your deck to your hand, and you have to have no cards in your hand to activate and resolve this effect. So obviously Infinities requires a handless combo. I don't think anyone's really playing Infinities that much, or if at all, so I can see why this is off the list. There's probably a reason why this has come at 3 now, but maybe it's because nobody's really playing them, so it's safe to put this back up at 3. Cashier Unicorn, now I believe this was at 2, now it's at 3. I mean, if you're going to bring Prank Tops and you have Fenrir still at 3, it makes sense that Unicorn would be at 3. So if you control no monsters, special summon this card from hand. Which is very similar to Tower Top. Once per turn during your main phase, you can add a cast hero spell from your deck to your hand. Okay, so that's a pretty good search. And when it declares an attack, or if your opponent activates a monster effect, you can look down. You can look at your opponent's extra deck and banish one monster face down. I mean, you're technically looking down, so that makes sense. But like, yes. Seeing this at 3, I think there's going to be a lot more cast hero strategies. So I think that's definitely going to be interesting. Mind Control. Now, this is the same as Snatch Steal, and we're going to talk about that a little later. Because this is, again, one of those hits that I'm like, that everyone's going, oh my goodness, and I'm like, and I will explain why. Power of Desires at 3. Banish 10 to draw 2. I mean, it used to be at 2, I think. Now it's at 3. It's gone very back and forth, up and down. Like, banishing 10 cards, I think it depends royally on the deck that you're using. I don't think you want to, you know, I think banishing 10 is too much, but what do I know? I think it's fine. Spell Book of Judgment, so I can't remember what this used to be on, but now it's at 3. So during the end phase of the turn this was activated, you can add spellbook cards from deck to hand except for Judgment, up to the number of spells activated after this card's resolution. Okay, so you play this first, then you play as many spells as possible, and then you can add as many spellbooks as possible. Okay. Then you can special summon from your deck one spellcaster whose level is less than or equal to the number of cards added to your hand. Okay, so this is really thinning out a deck. So the more spells that you play after you play Spellbook of Judgment allows you to really add a lot more spellbooks, except for this one. So that's interesting. That's interesting. I think that's I'd say a fairly strong card. I can see why, because that's a lot of like adding that you're doing. That's a lot of searching. Sprite Starter. And, you know, because you're not only adding a load of spellbooks, you're then special summoning a spellcaster up to the level less than or equal. So that's actually really strong. Next we have Upstart Goblin at 3. Hooray! But before that, Sprite Starter. I forgot about this one. Special summon a sprite monster from your deck, but lose life points equal to its original attack. For the rest of the turn, after this resolves, you can now special summon monsters, except for level, rank, or link to monsters. Okay. So, yeah, sprites are, yeah, they're level 2s, but so is live twins and things like that. So having this at 3 makes those decks quite, like, they fit quite nicely. But you have to run sprite, live twin, or all that type of stuff. And then you lose life points equal to its original attack, which I don't know how much sprites necessarily have. And this is a hard once per turn, because you can only activate this once per turn. But it is a quick play, so I do think that's interesting. It's an interesting card, to put it 3. But now Upstart Goblin at 3. Hooray! Draw 1 card and your opponent gains 1,000 life points. Interestingly enough, obviously I'm always looking to improve Exodia, so I'll happily take an Upstart Goblin at 3. Yes, please. This used to be limited. Now I can run 3 copies instead of 1. Thank you very much. Okay, so before I talk about the ban list in general, we need to talk about Snatch Steal and Mind Control. So, obviously Snatch Steal is you equip to one of your opponent's monsters, you take control of it, and then during the standby, your opponent's standby phases, they gain 1,000 life points, but obviously you're probably going to either want to link it off or use it as Xyz material or synchro material, since you can do whatever you want with it because Snatch Steal's old. You know, and Mind Control, which is now at 3, is you can target one monster your opponent controls until the end phase, take control of the target, but it cannot declare attack or be tributed. Again, you're not necessarily tributing, you're going to use it as rank material, or, or a link, or a synchro. But here's the thing. There is a lot of cards these days, right? A lot of cards that negate, these days. But obviously, Snatch Steal, why it was hit on the ban list for so long, makes sense. There was once, I think it was 2014, 2015, this came off at 1. And then the next ban list, immediately this was put on the ban list, back to Forbidden. It was briefly off at 1, and then immediately put back on. Again, that was back then. This is though now. There is so many more negates. There are so many more monsters that are unaffected by card effects. So many monsters that cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects. With that in mind, Snatch Steal and Mind Control are going second cards. So depending on your board, which can be quite easily have a gajillion negates, with things like Baron or Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, etc. Or even cards that are just like Chaos Ancient Gear Giant, who are unaffected. These will not do anything. They cannot do anything to these cards. They cannot target them. They are unaffected by them. Or you just flat out, they play it and you go, no, and negate. So in my opinion, these aren't going to do a whole lot. It really depends on your opponent's first board and what they're playing, but there's a lot of decks these days that have such impressive end boards that these just don't matter, and I think that's why, because like Change of Heart, for example, that's at 1 as well, which does the exact same thing. You target a monster. It's good if you can take a card. It's not good if there's nothing you can control. It's a brick then. So in my opinion, I think there's going to be, you're not really going to see these. Are you going to main deck Snatch Steal? No. Side it? Probably. But I don't think you're going to main deck this card. I don't, like, everyone's going nuts about it coming off the list because it's this old school card. But in this new environment, I just don't think it's going to make any impact. It's not, I don't think it's going to splash. But, like, obviously there's a lot of interesting plays you can do with it, but the thing is that you have to be able to target, and that's the ultimate question. Can you resolve these cards? And most of the time, it's gonna be no. Especially if you had, let's say you had There Can Only Be One played on board. Maybe that could be some sort of secret strategy, maybe, so that, like, let's say, I don't know, you had a dragon, you're playing the Red Dragon Archfiend structure deck, you summon a dragon. Well, that's the thing then, it's an illegal play, because you cannot steal it because it's an illegal move. So yeah, no, that doesn't even matter anyways. Ignore literally what I've said. See, that's what I mean. There's so many things about There Can Only Be One that really suck, because it's not listed on the card, but that would be an illegal move. It would just equip, not be able to move, which probably means you just can't activate it in the first place. So, yeah, overall, it's an interesting ban list. The ban cards, for the most part, make sense. There's one, which is Isolde. I'm sure there's a reason why. I just can't really see it, but that's just me. There's some limited cards, it's going to be interesting to see if Orcust Harp Horror does actually anything. I don't think we're really, these are still problematic in the sense that they're still limited at 1. So, ultimately you can still play all of them as a one-off and, still kind of mess with your opponent, because then they have to waste, like, their back row removals on the possible one. You know what I mean? Snatch Steal and Mind Control, I don't think, it's interesting that they're off the ban lists for for their respective reasons, you know, Snatch Steal 1 and Unlimited Mind Control, but I just don't think it's going to make that much difference. Upstart Goblin really depends on the deck that you're playing. For example, in Exodia, this is insane. However, I don't think a lot of decks are necessarily going to be like wanting to give your opponent 1,000 life points. Life points, sometimes they matter, sometimes they don't. It really depends on the deck. Like, Red Dragon Archfiend, for example, can gain a lot of life points using Crimson Resonator. I believe it's Crimson. It could be Red Resonator. Red Resonator. But ultimately, I'm not too sure. That's just me, though. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video. You know, let me guys know what you guys are thinking right now with this ban list. Remember, it's effective from January 1st of 2024, so I know I'm going to be building my Exodia deck ready for this ban list. Oh yeah, baby, it's getting those Upstart Goblins in there. Really refining kind of that deck. But ultimately, you know, I think it's an interesting scope. We'll see what happens ready for the next ban list, where maybe some of these might make a return, maybe some more cards might come off, you know, who knows? Terra Top, it could be like, you know what, we'll take this to 3. Who knows? But anyways, please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more content like this one. And as always, party on, peeps. Take care, guys. It was great to see you, and we'll see you again in the next one.